This is the Seers Seed podcast, where we explore the seer gift within the kingdom of God mindset.
Hi, Emily. USA, USA. Woo!
So underdressed right now.
Oh, yeah. Got my medals because America's going to win all the medals. We're going to swim and we're going to do gymnastics.
Wow. You really get into this stuff.
It's the Olympics.
Okay, so I have to ask, excited? Are you still excited for the Olympics? I mean, or is it just like build up for what we're going to jump into?
The fact is, I just kind of forgot about the Olympics, except that I'm a marketing manager in my real life, and our company is sponsoring the broadcast locally, so that's why I knew they were here. And I need to subscribe to a streaming package so that everyone can watch the swimming and the gymnastics, because we do like that every 4 years. But that's about as much as I know. I think I saw something on Facebook about Blasphemy.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit.
All right. Can you update me? Because I'm a little out of the loop. Except that, America's going to win all the medals.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have to believe that. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Sorry, my European friends who I know are watching, but America's going to win all the medals.
I am not a sports person, except for figure skating, I know, and some of the gymnastic stuff. So,
yeah. You just said I am not a sports person except for the coolest Olympic ones. I mean, really.
Yeah, because so I don't really keep up with it. I didn't realize that even that the Olympics were happening. That's how, out of touch. And then I woke up this morning and, oh my goodness, we have this whole situation where, man, I really don't even know how to get into it without sounding like I'm being terribly harsh on either side, because we have both extremes, that this is the end of the world and that this is Satanism in our face, because or no, Christians are just being overly sensitive. And so I want to kind of get into why we got to watch that balance. But anyway, What happened was during the opening ceremonies, there was a depiction of what bears a very strong resemblance to the Last Supper. And the participants in this little tableau were drag queens and transvestites and whatever. I don't know. I mean, it was obviously very hypersexualized. And the person who, if this is a representation of the Last Supper, who is supposed to be Jesus, was a woman. And so now I saw it and I immediately thought of Da Vinci's portrait of the Last Supper. I mean, it was pretty blatant to me. However, now the story is that no, this is not the Last Supper, and it was supposed to be a bacchanal or bacchanalia, depending on which emphasis you want to put on that, which is for the Roman god, who borrowed Bacchus and Dionysus, and they would have these wonderful feasts and orgies and times when there was actually divination occurring. And so now the question is, was this a deliberate slap in the face for Christians, or was it something harmless that Christians took the wrong way? So,
well, the Catholics, and so the Olympics, it's the 33rd Olympiad.
Mm-hmm.
The Olympics are in Paris, or in France, otherwise known as France, to our European friends who speak the mother tongue well. And I believe the Last Supper is it in the Louvre? Is it in
I believe it
Paris?
is.
It was painted in Milan, I believe, but it's displayed there.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody in Western civilization who would have the education and the connections to be in the opening ceremonies and who would organize the opening ceremonies would miss that it was a polemic against the Last Supper.
Yes.
So I know the Catholic leadership in France is has issued many statements. I believe the Pope has not. And I was listening to a BBC report right before we came on, and they said across the pond, a very popular Catholic leader here in the States said it was disappointing. Much of the opening ceremonies were beautiful, but clearly that was obviously an attack on Christianity, and it reflected a secular. This is so interesting. He said it reflected a secular and postmodern society, which I think is 100% wrong.
Ah, okay.
100% wrong.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Now, here's the thing: when I have the two sources, and I want to try to give fair representation. When
to the drag queens.
to the intent, but I do want to get to what's behind the intent.
Okay.
So
The Bacchanalia thing is very interesting. I had not heard that, so let's lean into it. But go ahead.
okay, so the Bacchanalia thing was actually something that the Olympic Games official X, formerly known as Twitter, they sent out the message. The interpretation of the Greek god Dionysus makes us aware of the absurdity of violence between human beings, and it shows a picture of supposed to be Dionysus, and with the what was being called the Last Supper behind him. The artistic and creative director of the Olympics, so opening ceremonies, his name is Thomas Jolly, and he says that it was not his intent to be offensive or subversive, but he never denies that it was supposed to be the Last Supper. I have seen other people claim that this was supposed to be a bacchanalia. So I think for me, because I went down the rabbit trail early this morning when it was still, oh, this is absolutely Last Supper. But I wanted to acknowledge, we're not trying to ignore what's being said, that we're not saying, oh, that nobody's refuting this. The creative and artistic director is not refuting it. That's what I want to point out. We have other people who are refuting it on his behalf, and his purpose and goal, he said, was to represent everyone and to make it feel inclusive. Kind of missed it as far as I'm concerned, because he wound up making thousands, millions of people who celebrate Christianity and the life of Christ and observe the Last Supper in communion then as being excluded and actually being ridiculed. So
some would say the whole inclusive movement is specifically meant to exclude Christian worldview. Christians in the West have been so defanged to be completely irrelevant.
And if we do say something, then we get, oh, you're being judgmental.
Yes. Right. Well, of course, because the people who say that want to defang Christianity. They want it to be completely irrelevant. It needs to be that thing you do on Sunday in your church. But in the rest of society, let's just celebrate the Roman gods.
Yes. Well, and so that is actually what I was thinking of. This is the Olympics. The
Olympics. All right, let's go there.
Okay, so just some quick facts. I mean, I don't want to bog us way down in a history lesson, although we are going to get bogged down in a few things. Yep. Our first recorded date where we have it written down for the Olympics is 776 BC. So this was almost 800 years before Jesus was born. The Olympics were, of course, held in honor of the Greek gods. It was just a foot race. And then later they added more and more elements over the years and began including, wrestling, discus, some of the classic depictions that we've seen of Olympic sports. Games were completely held in the complete nudity. So one of the proposed reasons for that is that it was to exclude Jews. Because if you're nude, everybody's going to know if you're circumcised or not.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
No Jews allowed.
Well, and there was actually Jews who did want to participate. There was a surgery for them to go through to reverse the process so that they could participate. Yeah.
Wow. So no, that's to me, that is shocking because the whole point of that was to honor the covenant between God and Abraham,
Yeah, it was a rejection of the covenant for a Jewish man to participate in the Olympics.
which was a pagan ritual to celebrate the gods. And I've heard that it's like the humanism, right? Because it's humanism. It's celebrating the human form. They're using military acts.
Mm-hmm.
So like throwing javelins, throwing discus, throwing shot puts, those are all reflected in warfare in that time period. So like, yeah, it's military training.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, military training, the gods of Athens were represented by, the soldiers, and the gods of Sparta, and whoever won reflected the spiritual warfare of whichever deity won the battle.
Exactly.
That's
Now,
interesting. This is 2024, and you said when were the Olympics started?
776.
That's 2,800 years ago.
Yeah. Now they
Exactly.
did die out.
Oh, you know who killed it,
Yeah, the Romans did.
and why did they kill it?
Because they did those Greek gods with their low morals polluting the people.
Yeah, because at that point, as in the 400s, I think, the Roman Empire had become Christianized, and the Christian Roman Emperor was like, this is ridiculous. Why are we sanctioning worship to fallen angels, to watchers, to demons? Well, he didn't say it quite like that, but
that was the final death knell. Because before that, the Romans were like, we don't want these Greek gods. They're polluting high values. Because even the Roman gods and the Greek gods, they're the same thing. But this goes into the territorial spirit somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want that crossover. So then when Christianity said, yeah, we're just going to stop it all.
Yeah, they're like, we're not celebrating this pagan stuff. It's so funny. So the Olympics, Mount Olympus, right? Isn't that where the gods lived in the Greek pantheon?
And because I want to talk about who founded this and why it was founded, why it was started. And so, because this ties into everything that's happening today. And by the way, did you have a significance with that number you wanted to go into when you were doing the math for
2,800? It's just it's a round number. I did some, it's 7 times 400. I don't know. You can go down these rabbit trails with numbers, and I did. And I spent way too much time today going down rabbit trails of numbers. I will say the 33rd Olympiad, 33 is a significant number in many traditions. One way you can look at the number 2,800 is by reducing the number. So this is what numerologists would do: reducing the number to its lowest function. So 2 plus 8 is 10. Reducing 10 all the way down, take out the zeros, you get to 1. You get 1, which is like a new era. It represents enlightenment, represents something new. It could also represent monism, where all is one, and all those things see expression in the transgender / homosexual / pansexual, pangender. That whole movement are expressions of this of monism, or all is one, or reducing everything down to a new age. This whole new age, like the old age of Christianity is done. It's death. It's over. We're replacing it. The Last Supper really was the Last Supper. That was it. No more Last Suppers. Now we have a new supper representing this bacchanalia, which I don't know what that means exactly. I'm pretending like I do, but I'll let you explain it.
Well,
so go ahead.
Okay, so we should address that because the Olympic board, whenever they put out on their Twitter site, they presented it like bacchanalias were something that were performed in ancient Greece. They weren't actually. They were performed in Rome, and they did celebrate the god Bacchus, and it had elements of Dionysus. Some of us are more familiar with that god, but this is the god of wine and promiscuous sex, and the god of basically debauchery. And we don't have any real information on how it was observed in the Roman Empire, because it was a mystery cult, and all the mystery cults kept all of their information very much to themselves. Livy did write about it in the History of Rome, but that was 200 years later. scholars have kind of questioned whether he was being a little bit more severe and sensational with his description. That he claims originally it was an all-women's event, that women would get together, they would eat, drink, they would do different sexual acts, and that this was something that happened with women across all classes. And if you're a Roman citizen, you don't like that. You don't want the classes mixing. That's a horrible thing. And then he says that due to a soothsayer, they moved it to a nighttime ritual. And so, yeah, and he was like adamantly against it. He really, really hated the Bacchanalias. And so it kind of makes you wonder, how bad were they? And, was
So
he?
the women were doing things?
Yeah, the women were doing it. Matter of fact, when at one point, I didn't write all this down, but at one point the Roman government decided to start basically governing what could happen, and they put limits on how many people could be there. That there could only be 3 women and 2 men at any point in time, where before this it was just a free-for-all throughout the city. Livy writes that the screams of the victims of sexual violence were covered up by the beating of drums and cymbals. Loud music was part of it. Music on panpipes with the satyr. We all know that the half goat, half man, that this was part of the celebration that was going on. And so even if that's what they're portraying at this opening ceremony at the Olympics, it's still not a great thing. And so I was really just kind of, I don't think they understood exactly what they were portraying, because it became something that was actually taken away from women and turned into something that became very oppressive for women. So, but that's the way the enemy's house runs. It's chaotic. And I think we need to remember that when we're dealing with anything from this kind of kingdom. There's not going to be consistency. There's not going to be logic. And that's not how it works. So did they answer your question on what a bacchanalia was?
Yeah, party.
Yeah.
Party with lots of sex and lesbian activity, which is interesting. Again, that's an expression.
Yeah.
Going to Romans 1, when you reject the creation and worship the creator, or reject the creator and worship the creation, which means worshiping anything that's created, it leads eventually to those kinds of sexual expressions. And the Roman ethics are funny. They professed to be, oh yes, we're monogamous, one man for one woman, but in practice they were having sex with particularly the slaves, but having just rampant. It was all behind the scenes. It was all hidden.
Oh yeah.
It was
hidden. I mean, it's weird because if you look at the Roman art, like in the bathhouses, I mean, that's in your face, and some of the pottery in your face. So yeah, it's almost like kind of like what we do with pornography today. It's like, oh well, we don't watch pornography, wink wink. But right. every man, it's a, that's the battle cry of the purity cult. But we won't get lost on that. So but when I started doing some digging on the Olympics themselves, I was actually kind of shocked to learn the origin. I don't think I'd ever studied it before. So
the original or the revision, the update.
As far as the original, as if we, everything's got roots, nothing is new, and so it's based on a story that Hercules decided he wanted to honor his daddy Zeus. And
Zeus raped a woman, human. So you had a deity rape, in human sex, giving birth to Hercules, who is a semi-god, semi-human. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and specifically, he wanted to honor Zeus for his victory over Chronos. Now, Chronos was the son of Uranus and Gaia, or the heavens and the earth, the mixing of the heavenly and the earthly realms. And yeah, and so Chronos is the youngest. Yeah, you're going to love this. Chronos is the youngest of 12 Titans. And so he married his sister Rhea, and before he got married, he'd actually castrated his own father. And of course, Titans is the word that in the Septuagint, one of the words used for giant. And so in the Septuagint, for anyone who doesn't know, that's the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And so Chronos marries Rhea, and he was told that his sons would kill him. So he swallows all of the children that they have together alive, except for Zeus. And Rhea manages to hide Zeus. Zeus manages to make his father vomit up the other kids. I'm giving a greatly truncated version of this.
Sure.
Well, the dad vomits up the other kids. They fight against Chronos. And then Zeus banishes Chronos to Tartarus. And of course, we know Tartarus from 2 Peter. What verse is that? 2:14. And so that's where the angels are chained. And
the angels from before the flood in Genesis 6,
yeah,
the sons of God who came to earth. That's, yes,
4.
they are chained. Yep.
2:4.
Right.
Yeah. And then, according to some stories, Chronos is then later released, and he becomes the king of Elysium, which is the land of the blessed dead. But Chronos is where we get our basis for the word chronology, chronicle, synchronize. It's time.
Huh.
And a lot of our ideas about time, father time, are based on this image of Chronos, which has become conflated in art with our imagery of God, with the long white hair and the long white beard. And so there is a connection there. And we're going to get back to that. But I mean, you've already pointed out, we've got some obvious connections with the story of the Watchers. We have this mingling of the heavenly and the earthly realms, and they're producing titans, they're producing giants. Then we have these titans giving birth to these divine beings that then take over and rule. We have this cannibalism. This is the other big theme where Chronos is swallowing his children whole. We have this war between Creator God and the offspring, the sons of God rebelling against God.
So hang on. If you're going to do a polemic against, which a polemic is like a religious mimicking / overturning of another religious idea. So if you're going to do a polemic of the Last Supper, which involves taking bread, which is the body of Christ, and blood, or wine, which is the blood of Christ, i.e., a mockery of that would be cannibalism.
Right.
Okay.
Which is exactly what the early Christians were accused of in the Roman culture, which is interesting in and of itself, since they celebrate these gods.
But a pagan Last Supper, like a pagan version of that, would be actually cannibalistic.
Yes. Yes. And so, okay, so why is this important concerning this issue? And the number one thing we need to remember, the Olympics were a religious ceremony. That's where it starts out. It's not just a sporting event. In the ancient Greece, it was actually honoring Zeus. We have Zeus, who a lot of people don't realize. Yes, we have all these stories about him raping women, which is still popular to tell. We can portray that in children's movies even. We talk about this openly. What about Ganymedes, the Trojan prince, that he hauled up to Olympus with him to serve as his cupbearer because they were lovers. Plutarch wrote that Hercules himself had 6 male lovers, and that possibly an entire fleet of the Argonauts, which, if you remember your Greek history, this was the elite fighting force, that they were all Hercules lovers. So we have 2 very high-profile men who are gay or bi or pan, however you want to say it. Basically, they're going to have sex with whoever they can have sex with. And then we have so many other Greek gods and goddesses who are involved in various sexual relationships. They're not just heterosexual relationships. So we should not be surprised that last night very much was a spiritual spectacle.
Yes.
I think we all have to agree it was meant to portray something spiritual, because it was, if it wasn't Bacchanalia, fine. That's still a spiritual religious event. And
Yep.
it's one completely counter to what we believe and hold dear. And it was done so in a way deliberately to make fun and to belittle. Matter of fact, some of the sites were called spoofs or parodies of the Last Supper. It was to make a mockery. And so we need to be aware that this is normal. Now, the real point is that all of the stories about Zeus and Hercules connecting with the Watchers was to try to rewrite history as the Bible presented it. It was an attempt to distract us from the real message, because the real message of Christ's life is loving submission to the Father. It's faithful obedience to the Father. That's the one thing, excuse Hector, that's the one thing that is completely missing from the Greek myths, from every ancient myth. Hold on one second, I'll be a dog. Hector, more, lay down. Every ancient myth, the son is always trying to kill the father. A lot of they succeed. It's only in the Hebrew scriptures and in Christianity the son is capable of trusting the father to do good things for him, to love him and support him and to acknowledge him. Christ shows us with his life that we can trust our Father. That's the huge thing. Every pagan story, every occult ritual is nothing more than a perversion of what we hold to be true. So even a bacchanalia was a perversion of what we hold true. They weren't celebrated in ancient Greece. They were celebrated in Rome. They were celebrated after the time of Christ. Where do you think they got that imagery? It wasn't because it sprang out of their own heads. Satan can't create anything. He has to take and twist and pervert what God has already created. And so I think we need to remember that even if the intent was to present something that was nothing to do with Christianity, the spiritual beings that started this whole thing knew exactly what was going on. So
yes. Yep.
I think there's some levels of evil that humanity can't get to on their own. I think we need to push. We need that Nakash or that serpent in the garden. We need watchers to teach us the occult knowledge. We need some kind of spiritual force to come in and say, okay, you had this thought, but I can take it further. And I think that's what we saw. I think that's exactly what we saw last night with the opening ceremonies.
Yeah, in the West, we have certainly experienced an overturning of Christian morality in the last generation, Judeo-Christian morality, where the expression we are living in the Romans 1 curse, where God has turned over the culture to what we want, and this is why the transgenderism, the LGBTQIA, that's the dominant sexual expression or expression of worship to the monist, to monism, to all is one God. And it's interesting that the only group offended were some Christians who saw it. It's because those expressions are okay in many other faith traditions, not Islam,
right?
But many other faith traditions. Islam would kill all those people. Well, some expressions of Islam will. Other expressions of Islam is perfectly comfortable. I just have to say that the largest Islamic country in the world is Indonesia, where there's rampant sexual slavery and different expressions of sexual morality. And to be honest, that is a natural expression of Allah, of worshiping Allah, because Allah is one, and Allah is one.
Yeah,
is one God. There's no personhood. There's no Trinity. So Allah requires the creation to experience relationship.
Yeah.
To experience that, and because God requires the creation, that He is dependent on the creation, which means he's the same substance as the creation, which means he is one with the creation, and therefore a natural expression of that will come into deviant sexual behavior.
Right.
And we call it deviant because the standard was given in the word. And everyone knows it's deviant. Everyone knows it is. The people participating in it, they know it is.
Well, and we don't realize there's this huge push. Love is love. Okay. But love is transformative. And love is life-giving. And love is supposed to empower you to fulfill the purpose God put you here to accomplish, whatever that is. And
Love is love is an expression of slavery to the pagan gods.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
is an expression of slavery because you are enslaved.
Yeah.
You are unfettered. You are fettered. You have become less than human, actually. You are identifying yourself through who you want to have sex with. You are
Right.
identifying yourself through the gender you want to be. You are actually saying, a transgender person actually saying, I pre-existed eternally as gender A, and then a vicious god or a vicious creation put me in the wrong gender, but I know inside, the truth is within, that I am gender A, and therefore I will force the creation to conform to what I know that I have existed outside. And when I die, I will transcend. I will become enlightened. I will become a new entity, back to gender A. That is monism, right? That is paganism at its root. And go ahead.
Oh, no, well, and what's interesting to me about it is I'm bipolar. I've been very open with that. I learned early on, I can't trust my thoughts. I can't trust my feelings. I had to deliberately decide whether or not I was going to subject myself to an outside standard. And then I had to decide what that standard was going to be. And I spent literally years researching various religions because I wanted to reject Christianity. And Christianity is the only one that says who I am as the entirety of who I am, my mind, my spirit, my soul, my body, all of that was designed to work together. I'm not trying to transcend my body because my body's not evil. My body's part of who I am. It's part of my creation. That's part of who God designed me to be. And so in subjecting myself to biblical standards in my thinking and what I feel, and even the relationships I've had to cut off before I married Ty, there was a romance that was amazing. Yeah, whatever. But it was ultimately deadly and poison to me. And so I had to get out. And in subjecting myself to this outside standard and realizing that, no, they're right. God did not make a mistake when he put me in this body, that I know who I am based on his word, that now I can embrace all of who I am. I don't have to hate who I am. I can understand, I live in a broken world. I live in a fallen world. Sin has impacted creation, but I serve a God who redeems that. He didn't abandon me or make a mistake. He didn't just leave me to my own devices to try to figure it out. He's actually here to guide me in how I deal with this. And I know there's going to be pushback. Oh my gosh, she just equated me with having a mental illness. Well, anytime you're lying to yourself about what's going on in your body and your head, that's what we.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. We have learned so far through the biblical model to interpret what Seers see is that there is a chaotic undercurrent that God created and is tamed, but it's still there. The chaos does impact us, the chaos and the environment, chemicals going wrong in our brain, things going wrong in our DNA whenever it's multiplying, cancer developing. Not all cancer is from a demon. Sometimes it's just chaos. Sometimes it's just nature gone awry. But there's also spiritual powers, the Watchers, which taught things like how to beautify women and turn them into something less than the image of God, which is what I was getting to earlier. Less than the image of God. You're not defined by who you want to have sex with. You're not defined who you're attracted by or to. The fact is, I'm a man. I'm attracted to more than one woman.
Mm-hmm.
I am not as a slave to those passions. I could be, but God took that and nailed it to the tree.
Oh man, I could be a slave to chocolate cake. That's how weak I am. I I y- I think that's just wonderful. And I'm not trying to make light of these bigger desires. I'm saying a small desire can get me out of alignment. And so I have to have God bringing me back around. And how does he do that? Through his word. He does it through friends, people who will correct me gently, people who will love me even when I say, "Hey, I've had this thought or that thought." And y there was an interesting point in there, not being defined by who you love. I deeply loved my first husband.
Mm.
I wanted our marriage to work. I had to get out because he had rejected God and he'd chosen violence in the place of love and peace and honor that he'd vowed to me in our marriage. And so now I can look back at that and say, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm not defined by that relationship." What got me out of it was knowing that God didn't want me there and knowing that he had made me free to get out and to pursue him unencumbered by the evil that my ex brought along with him.
You are not defined by who you love. You are defined by who loves you, the capital W.
Isn't that great?
He defines it, and because of that, we are drawn into relationship. You are not defined by who you want to have sex with. You are not defined by the gender you think you are. You are defined by the Creator who shows who you are through the creation. Those with certain chromosomes are a certain gender. People will say, well, gender is created by the culture. And that's a lie. Gender is created by sex.
I always, when people tell me that, I want to go, how many boys and girls have you raised? How many boys and girls have you watched from 2 to 3? Because, I've got 2 grandkids. I've never had a boy in the home before. He's 4.
Oh man, they're different.
Oh my goodness, it's a totally different ballgame.
You can put a dress all you want and put pink all you want on. That is subjecting that kid to mental abuse. It's a pagan sacrifice. Let's
Yeah.
just be clear.
Well,
If you submit your child to the wrong gender,
Mhm.
you are sacrificing that child to a pagan watcher, a watcher who's probably in chains in hell, still influencing, still having influence until the day of judgment. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. This is absolutely ridiculous. Genesis 1, Genesis 2 tells you who you are, and you are to raise your kid in the way he or she is,
Mhm.
not conform to some weird pagan sex rite, sacrificing your kid, putting him through the fires, mutilating your kid through government schools. In California now, they passed a law stating teachers are not required to inform the parents if their kids are transgender. Okay, this is like seriously, and this is paganism.
Mhm. Mhm.
Ultimately, where I mean, we're in Romans 1. You're in the Tower of Babel again. You're in Babylon.
Yeah.
You're in Sodom and Gomorrah, where and that's literally what's going on. It is paganism. And I saw the images. I wasn't offended. I laughed.
Right.
I laughed. You know who gets offended when we appropriate their stuff? The enemy, right?
Yeah.
The Bible is not full of, but the Bible has multiple pagan texts where it said, oh, it took some worship song to Baal, and the Hebrew writer said, that's not Baal, that's Yahweh. And he just changed the word to Yahweh, and the pagans were like, that's appropriation. That's appropriation. You are a supremacist. And the Hebrews are like, yeah, we are, because our God is, no one is beside our God.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I'm
I
getting a little
this
passionate here, but this is
this is not new, is what we're trying to say. This has been going on. Everything we're seeing is something that's been happening since the dawn of time. Um, we've seen mutilation with priests and priestesses and temple prostitutions and what have you. And going back,
in ancient Israel.
yeah,
This is why they were ancient Israel. This is what the prophets were so ticked about. Like, oh my goodness, Solomon, after he built the temple and built his house, eventually he built temples to the sex goddesses, where
yeah,
they would mutilate the men. They'd cut the men's testicles off, and they pretend that they were women, and then the men would have sex with them.
yeah.
And that was worship. And they would have it in public. It was pornography in public. Porn, by the way, is the name of a pagan deity, sex goddess. So it's like, it was like, that was ancient Israel. It's in your scriptures.
Right.
And modern English translations sometimes obscure it, but it's in there. You can see it, and it's in your face, and it's disturbing.
Well, and it should be. That's the point.
It
And
should be.
you know, well, I think we forget that. And now I did want to bring home that we as believers, we should not be afraid of any of this, because I saw people who were fearful.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, no, that's giving them way more power than they deserve. And the other thing I realized, when we have this kind of in your face kind of, I don't want to say oppression, because it's not oppressive. That's taking it too far. But it is insulting, and this mockery of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
We're set up for two things. Okay, Jesus can come back, or we're set up for revival. I can go with either one of those. I
mean, that's who toppled the Roman Empire, was Christianity. When it spread, it took a few centuries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then then the government took it, and another story. Yeah. Right. Look, be afraid of it. Come on, people. All right. So you talked about Chronos, chronometer. That's where we get the word time and also measurement.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We talked about 33. We talked about 2800. You want to talk more about the ancient Olympics? Because I there's a couple things I want to say about time and measurement.
Okay. Really, that's the only thing I wanted to say. I think I got all through the ancient Olympics part. I think the main thing was just kind of for today. So should we go into your stuff, or should we? Sure.
Yeah. That's fine. I don't know. It's a little all over the place because there's just so much. These are rabbit trails, right?
Yeah. We got ready for this podcast today.
Yeah.
Because this happened last night.
Yep. I just, the people who are afraid, look, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem because they had turned away from Yahweh, and they were worshiping the false gods. And God's like, all right, fine. I'm bringing Marduk, took him by a hook, hooked him, because, Marduk probably didn't want to come.
Yeah. Not a fan.
Hooked him, came, drug him, and Nebuchadnezzar, and they took out Jerusalem, destroyed it in 587 BC, I think. Right. 587 BC. Yes, 587 BC. Interestingly enough, Jerusalem, the temple on Jerusalem, was 587 statute miles from Babylon. The statute mile was, we'll talk about that. It was established under Queen Elizabeth. We'll talk about that here in a minute. 587 statute miles. A few years later, in 539, the Babylonian king took when Nebuchadnezzar sacked the temple and destroyed it, he took, which is, by the way, the destruction of heaven and earth. We have a hard time understanding what that means. That was where God met on earth. And even though they're doing all sorts of terrible things, that was their identity was just shattered. Yeah. That's where heaven and earth met, gone. Okay. So anyway, but before he destroyed it, he took a lot of the plates and furniture and stuff out of the temple because it was made of gold, and then took it back to Babylon. Well, anyway, a few years later, 539, the king of Babylon was drunk, having almost a bacchanalia probably, and said, you know what, let's get those plates and stuff that were dedicated to the Hebrew God, and let's have a Last Supper with it. Mm-hmm. All right?
Like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're going to make a polemic, Marduk one. We're going to make a mockery of Yahweh with his stuff. And it was his Last Supper. Dude, he saw a handwriting on the wall, and he freaked him out, and he got all of his magicians and all of his pagan astrologers, and finally they we don't know what it means. Go get that guy Daniel, who at this time is pretty old. Daniel comes in, and he says, oh, here's what it says. Mene, Tekel, Uparsin. The interpretation of the matter is this. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tonight, by the way. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perish, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And that night, that very night, probably at that very moment, the Medes and Persians were invading Babylon, and the king died that night. You want to know who won? Marduk was like, "Stop! Do not mock Yahweh. Do not do it. Don't. Oh, you idiot!" And they were all killed that night, and that led to the freeing of the Israelites in captivity. That
Absolutely.
was in 539. So you take Mini, Tekel, Uparsin, and if you convert those words into numbers, because letters back then doubled, kind of like Roman numerals, they double as numbers, that comes to 2,520. 2,520. 2,520 is a strange number. It's a number found in the ancient world as a very powerful number related to all sorts of things. For instance, 7 times 360 comes to 2,520. It turns out you take that number, 2,520, and you take that number and you times it by pi. You come to the number that's the diameter of the Earth, 7,916. Just a weird thing, right?
Yeah, something I
Isn't that
never
weird?
figured out.
Yeah.
Looking.
Yeah, I didn't figure it out either. I found it somewhere else. I'll tell you about who later. 2,500. That number, let me just say, this number is like a root of measurements of the Earth, of the sun, of the moon. 6 times 360 is the diameter of the moon. So you have these numbers, 6, 360. What is 360? It's the number of days. It's a sacred year, right? It's number of degrees in a circle. This goes through ancient times. A third, 33, or 0.33, a third of 360 is 19:48, 19 minutes, 48 seconds. That's kind of an interesting number, 19 degrees, 48 seconds. Did you know Jerusalem is 33 statute miles from the sea at an angle of 19 degrees, 48 seconds, or 48 minutes?
No clue.
And 19 degrees, 48 minutes is a fractal
Okay.
of 1948.
Uh-huh.
What happened in 1948? Anyone remember?
Israel became a nation.
Modern Israel, London declared, the government of London and also the United States, but London led it. It was declared in London that Israel was an independent nation.
And that's what opened the floodgates for all the fun stuff that I've studied.
London, by the way, happens to be 1,948 statute miles from Jerusalem. Just fun facts. I don't know. It's weird. 33. Jesus started his ministry at 30. He died, more importantly, resurrected at 33. He lived most of his life in Galilee. Galilee, which is a geographic depression in a circle. All right. So GL actually means circle. It's a geographic depression. The ancients knew their geography. They knew sacred space. And so they just called it GL. The root word for Galilee is GL, right? GL in Hebrew is 33.
Of course it is.
Yeah. The northernmost part of Jesus's recorded ministry is Sidon, which happens to be 33 degrees north, 33 minutes, 33 seconds. Funny.
That's interesting.
The word God, singular God, so in Hebrew, not Elohim for plural, but when it's singular, it occurs 33 times in Genesis. In the book of Luke, he records 33 miracles of Jesus.
I had not counted. This is
I had not counted either. I did not come up with all these myself. I'll show you who I gave it to, or who I'll show you the source here in a minute. But oh, by the way, the statute mile, like how could these miles matter? Because the statute mile was invented in 1592 by Queen Elizabeth under the direction of John Dee.
Oh, really? Okay. I see the connection now. Wow.
Thanks to David Flynn's Temple at Center of Time. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, this guy, Newton, actually, Isaac Newton came up with a lot of this stuff. It's his research. And these numbers go deep, and they probably don't mean anything, except there is a God who likes numbers. John Dee and other occultists, John Dee was an occultist. He was probably a seer. He was Queen Elizabeth's seer. He said that he heard the angelic language, the Enochian language, he said. He wrote a whole book down with all sorts of like occultic information in it. He was also a brilliant mathematician. He said that if England wanted to rule the world, they needed to have a strong navy. And so they worked really hard on the measurements.
And he had a buddy that was supposed to actually like channel the angels so that John Dee could hear him, and I can't remember his name. And he was an alchemist, of course, which
alchemy thinks that the number 33 is the perfect balance between the divine and the mundane, the divine and the mundane,
earthly,
which is when you said earlier. That's why I was like, oh, I just read about that. The union of the spiritual and the natural, which, by the way, all that is wonderful. We want the union of the spiritual and the natural. It's called the temple. It's called Jesus.
And now we're the
and now it's us,
Yeah.
when the Holy Spirit comes and lives in you through faith in Christ.
And it's not some illicit sexual relationship. It's not through some crazy ritual. It's through faith and repentance and just reaching out to our Father who loves us.
He wants to free you so you can be truly human. He wants to free you so you can be truly human. I mean, it's strange. That number 2520, I'll put like it's the center of so many weird calculations, along with pi, which is the number you use to calculate calculate measurements of a circle.
Yeah, and I always think of those as
I have one more thing. I'm sorry, one more thing, and then I'll shut up and I want to hear what you had to say. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Did you know that? He was born in Bethlehem?
I think I heard that once upon a time.
Yeah. Where he is supposed to have been born, like in Bethlehem, is like 500 feet from. Oh, blast! I should never do this live. I should have this all prepared. 31 degrees, 41 minutes, 59 seconds north of the equator, which is a fractal of pi.
Okay. Sure, why not? Yeah, that's what I was saying. These are like, to me, this is like God's wink. I mean, he's just winking at us. Like, did you see what I did there?
You said something a few weeks ago about like thumbprint, like God's thumbprint on creation.
Oh.
And like when he was making things and he just like his thumbprint, and maybe that's it. He's just, I don't know.
Why not? I think, I know as an artist, when I create something, there's a lot of me in it. And so I would think with an infinite, omnipotent God that there's a lot of him in creation. Now, I am completely different than my paintings or my drawings, just like God is completely different from his creation. So, I think we shouldn't forget that. And I do want to make the point, because we brought up John Dee. Somebody's going to go, ooh, now I need to research him.
No, don't.
There's so much better time to spend your time on. There's so many better ways to spend your time. The Enochian angelic alphabet that he came up with, guys, it's bunk. It doesn't mean anything.
It's occultic nonsense. He was divine. He was trying to, we talked about this last week or a couple weeks ago. Whenever you try to go beyond what the Lord has revealed, then you have become Eve. Yeah. You're plucking the fruit. If you're like, I'm really interested in this, go to the Lord and go, hey, Lord, I'm really interested in this thing. He'll be like, yeah, no. Just listen to him. Listen to him, because historians have done it. We did a paranormal episode several years ago on John Dee. I'll link it in the show notes.
Okay, forced.
Yeah.
You want more?
Yeah, we did it. I think we did it on Isaac Newton, and it was related to John Dee because they were very interested in the same thing. I mean, these are smart guys. Newton did not go into occultism. He went to alchemy a little bit, but John Dee was an occultist, and he was an advisor to one of the most important queens.
And he wound up doing some wife swapping at the end of his life. So
Did he?
oh yeah,
Of course he did. I mean,
that. I mean, you cannot get away from that point. And so I
mean, but the point of this is that, like, we're supposed to talk about territorial spirits, and we'll probably get to it maybe next time. But like, the spirit world is real. There are territorial spirits who do influence, and yeah, he was tapping into something which led to the greatest empire until the American Empire, the British Empire.
Yeah.
Which yes, and the things they did, some of it was good, some of it was horrible. They said they did it maybe in the name of God, but there were spiritual powers behind the crown, which drove some of that.
Yeah.
To dominate, that will to dominate, with modern technology that had never been seen before, with a navy that was unparalleled, and then now it partners maybe with the United States, which is now the global empire, and it's given wholly over to paganism. So when the Catholic guy who said, "Oh yeah, this is a reflection of secularism," no, it's not, dude. Come on, you know it's not. It's a reflection of paganism.
And you would think that a Catholic leader would understand that this is a spiritual, a spiritual war and a spiritual statement. Because, I mean, even right now in the Catholic Church, they can't get enough exorcists.
Yeah, maybe he did, but maybe he's afraid to say it because then he has to explain it.
Right.
Are you saying the gods are back? Yeah, the gods they were never gone. They were subverted.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And I think that was one of the points I had, my last point that I'd written down. You, in the section on territorial spirits, you bring up the verse in Ephesians, for wrestle not with flesh and blood. Okay, there was a lot of flesh on display. These people showed us they're not the enemy. The spirits behind them, the spirits that helped design this, that inspired this, that's our enemy. And so we need to be praying for these people. We need to be praying for their salvation, their redemption. We need to be standing against the spirits that inspired these acts. But we cannot call these people our enemy because they're the images of God. Now, I think at some point you can cross over and you're going to be completely turned over to that reprobate mind. But only God knows where that line is. And until he reveals that line's been crossed, we need to be very careful about just discounting someone because they look different than us. And I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds like what they're saying, about inclusion and all of that stuff. Well, yeah, God is very inclusive in who he loves. But love never leaves you where it finds you. This is the basis of every fairy tale we've heard from the beginning of time. Why? Because we all know it's true. We all know that love, it brings you out of darkness. It brings you out of that stupor, and it transforms you.
It rescues us.
Yes.
It rescues us. It brings us out of the miry clay and sets us on the feet to stay.
Yeah. And
love is love. Well, more to the point, God is love. And he'll pull you out. He wants you to have true life. Love is love leads to death. The pagan gods, I have that in the chapter. The territorial spirits, they want slavery, they want economic injustice, and they want death.
Yeah.
I mean it, economic injustice. Oh, you sound like a Marxist. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you think that sounds like Marxism. Go back and read like the Bible. God is outraged at the economic injustice, the poor being oppressed by the wealthy. Why? I mean, Solomon enslaved people, his own people. Solomon led Israel right back into Egypt.
Yes.
And Egyptian slavery, and they never recovered until Jesus.
Yeah.
And now we have to be who he says we are and live how he wants us to live, which means caring for the poor. It means loving the people who aren't like us.
Yeah.
The people who freak us out, the transgender community, love them. Love them. I had transgender kids who came to my youth group. I called them by the whatever pronoun they wanted to be called. I called them by whatever name when they wanted to be called. I loved them. I did. And I preached Genesis 1 and 2, their identity in Christ, their identity. And all of them left the transgenderism behind and embraced who God made them to be. I'm not saying all of them continue the walk. It's a walk, right?
Right.
But I saw all of them transformed by the renewing of their mind, by getting in the Word.
Yeah.
So you can love people who are not like you. God loves the transgender. He died for them. He died for the Romans. He didn't want to kill the Romans. He wanted to save them.
Exactly. Because that was the other thing I was thinking of. It's like Jesus never saw somebody who was demon possessed running towards him and he went, "Get away from me." He never said, "I can't stand to be around you." He you know,
Who was it? Somebody rejected Jesus and the disciples, and the disciples like, should we call down fire from heaven and kill them? He's like, dude, really?
Chill out.
I'm not Zeus.
Well, yeah, and that was the other thing, because we were talking about Chronos. I mean, yes, Father Time. Okay, God is the creator of time, and they're going to reframe that as time, something that's going to swallow you up, just like he swallowed up his children, and or Chronos swallowed up his children. God comes to redeem time. Time is a fabulous construct. If there's a beginning point, it presupposes an end. And that end for us is amazing. And before that, you were just trapped like hamsters on a wheel, repeating the same cycle over and over again. Now we're building to something. So every minute counts, every second counts, every interaction we have counts, because it's building towards that end. And so there are so many opportunities for us not to rise up in anger. Yes, speak the truth. Don't hesitate to do that. But don't rise up in anger and try to hurt people because they hurt us. That's not what Jesus did. You know, we think of turning the other cheek in a physical act. Turn the other cheek on this, guys. Speak truth, but turn the other cheek.
It's
hit back.
Don't get it. Yes, I hear sometimes the Christians, I'm getting death threats from Christians. They're not Christians.
Right.
Christians don't give death threats.
Right. And if they are, and they've forgotten who they are.
Exactly. So I should caveat that with, yes, they're acting out of something that they've forgotten who they are. They're doing like an Eve. I forgot who I am. I have my identity stolen. And we can be angry at them. We can be sad for them. But just keep in mind, like, Christians, remember who you are. Don't be like don't be like what James said, where you go to Scripture and then you see who you are and you turn away from it and you forget.
Right.
I want to, we said something earlier, and how the ancient gods, the son always slew the father or attempted to slay the father. And so some people will say, well, in Christianity, the father slew the son. And I just want to deal with that, because that is like a zeitgeist, false idea. The son was given. God did not kill the son. God did not kill the son. The son was given as protection as God waged war against the false gods. And if you wanted protected from the results of that war, then you get in the son. And the son laid his life down to protect people, just like you would lay your life down to protect. Just like the person at the Trump shooting, who the bullets are coming, and he shielded his family with himself. Right. I mean, that's what happened. Like, God is waging war against the spiritual powers, and people who are under their thrall are going to die, and they're not going to live forever. They're going to die. They're going to be dead. They're going to be judged. All they need to do is understand the good news that they can be set free from slavery to the gods. And by the way, the New Testament phrase for idolatry is sin.
Right. Yeah. But
I think we sometimes, we talk about sin so much that people tune it out. So I just want to get back to the root Sin is idolatry to the false gods, acting out of a stolen identity, acting out of less than who you really are.
I think that's why I love the Hebrew interpretation of repentance. In Greek, it means to turn away, and in Hebrew, it means to return.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're returning to God, you're returning to Father. He's got his arms open. He wants you. And so I think so often we don't believe there's a God who wants us. And so
It's the prodigal son returning home. He repented.
yes.
And he thought, I'm not worthy. I'll be lesser than who I am. But he was repenting, and the father's like, no, you are never less than who you are.
Yeah, because he sees the truth. He sees the truth of his creation. And I think we need to hold on to that we have a God who says, this is the truth of who you are. That's huge. When you can make that part of your everyday life and go, okay, yes, I want to do this, but I'm not, because that's not who I am. It suddenly dealing with those temptations, those dark thoughts, those horrible dark thought patterns, man, it's amazing how much more easily they're conquered. And so that's something we've got to get back to as a practice as Christians, because I think too often we just, we're going to go say a prayer at church and then we're going to walk out and forget. And
Right. Church is supposed to help you with the renewal of your mind so you can go out and live who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And, look, we joked offline about the Christians who see pagan origins of Christmas
Mm-hmm.
and of Easter, and certainly some expressions of Christmas and Easter were rooted in paganism, but actually Christmas wasn't. But originally, but nonetheless, look, the Olympics really are rooted in paganism. They were reborn by a Catholic, actually, as an expression to try to end war, which is, sorry, it didn't work. But it was supposed to be like, you can bring nationalism out in sports in healthy ways, and you can have a just wonderful unifying event, which is kind of nice, actually. It's too bad that Olympic Village turns into basically a big sex fest, and like it's going back to its pagan roots, sadly. And it's been that way for many Olympics. There's been many Olympic opening ceremonies that have been prophetic from a pagan perspective.
Yes.
And this is no different.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, you know what? Let's just end with Psalm 2.
I like this idea.
Definitely was not planned, but let's just do it because God is the maker of time. Psalm 2. This is my daughter's Bible, so I have to hold it out here because the print is really small. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. And the Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possessions. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, this is the psalmist saying to the kings, now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest you be angry, and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him.
Absolutely perfect.
Keep this on. What did you say about sports and Christmas?
It's I think that the reason why we haven't stopped participating in the Olympics, or the churches aren't calling out the Olympics, is because it's sports. It's one of the biggest idols in America for such a long time. I mean, for ages, how many families won't miss a Sunday or Wednesday night at all unless it's for sports? Oh, my kid
Yeah.
has a game. We teach our kid sports come first.
Travel basketball, and my kids in travel basketball. The team that we participated in made it clear you don't miss church.
Yeah.
For travel basketball, which was shocking to hear. And why is that shocking to hear? I was glad to hear it, But you're right. I mean, people will spend a fortune on travel sports. They'll spend a fortune skipping church every week, going to an NFL game, going to a basketball game. And I don't care for the NFL so much, but I do like sports. I do. But where are we hear Christians saying all the time, Christmas is pagan, Halloween is pagan. How could you?
Yeah.
How could you? Easter is pagan. Sorry?
We wouldn't participate in that.
No, we would never do anything pagan. But you know what? We'll go to a high school football game with teenage girls in short skirts, dancing, flipping around, trying to turn the crowd on. Let's just be honest. Why are they dressed like that? It's to turn people on. Why? So they get excited to cheer. This goes back to naked sports, bacchanalia, getting people excited for their gods, the celebration of the human body.
And if we aren't at a high school football game, what are they serving? We're serving all kinds of alcohol. We're serving bad food. We're serving, everybody's in excess. Like all of the spectators, when I say all, a majority of the spectators couldn't even play the game they're watching that they claim to appreciate because they're in such bad shape from their debauchery and their gluttony. And so,
I mean, some of the sports now, beach volleyball. Why do they wear that in beach volleyball? Why are they wearing that in beach volleyball? And and some of the men in their clothes when they swim. They might sound like a prude. Look, the human body is amazing.
Oh, it's awesome.
Our culture is awash in sexualizing young people and sexualizing the human body. And like beach volleyball is awesome, but they're mostly naked. Unless they're Muslim, and hand it to the Muslims, they're covering themselves up.
Yeah. But you get a Christian girl who says, "Hey, I don't feel comfortable with this. This is the uniform. This is what you got to wear."
I mean, on a basketball team my daughter plays, there's a young woman, a girl who is of a Christian tradition who is very modest, and she doesn't wear the same shorts as the other girls. Now, granted, I think the shorts are probably fine. Nonetheless, she is taking a stand, and I honor that. I respect that. But I guess our point we're trying to say is Christians look past the pagan roots of sports.
Yeah, and the Olympics in particular.
And the Olympics in particular, which are originally, as we know, literally a pagan thing because it's sports. I don't know. I don't have a charge on that. I don't have like a correction. I just highlighting it. Am I saying don't watch the Olympics? No, I'm not saying that at all.
Well, it's funny to me. It's like, because the more I just keep going back to this point. They are literally celebrating a divine son who kills his father. That is so counter to our message and our God and everything he does. And we're okay with this. I don't get it. I now it's probably easier for me because I'm not a sports person. Like, just not. So, but wow. I mean, it kind of shows our hypocrisy as a Christian quote unquote nation, But
it does. I'll just let people chew on that because I don't have an answer for it. I think we can redeem. Sports should be redemptive. We can redeem it.
Oh yeah.
We can redeem it, but it is funny. The vast silence, the global silence.
Yeah. Well, I would say the one thing I would, as a caution, don't violate your conscience. If God is convicting you, then don't watch. If it's not violating your conscience, it's probably just meat unto idols at this point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, meat unto idols.
Yeah.
We'll address that some other time.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. This is the second time we'll try to end this. Let's see. Okay. We will. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Seers podcast. Opening and closing music is Sun by Jason Callahan. Bumper music includes Just Around the World and Alta Heron by Keela Caps. Music and Seers podcast are distributed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0.